Beau is Afraid is an insane journey that no one was ready for, including writer-director Ari Aster's hardcore fans. A tragedy that takes place in a surreal world, exempted from logic and governed only by symbolism and the inner workings of its main character's mind. The movie shares some themes with Aster's previous works like trauma, bereavement, and the inheritance of psychological issues, but the experience as a whole is completely different. That being so, if you haven't watched it yet, don't expect another Hereditary or Midsommar, but rather something akin to Charlie Kaufman's works like Synecdoche in New York and I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Also, if you haven't watched the movie, you should probably come back later, because in this video I will try my best to explain the events and analyze the hidden meanings behind them, which of course requires getting into spoilers. I would also like to state that parts of my analysis will be based on my personal point of view and my understanding of the story, because the movie doesn't always provide clear answers, and because it's very tough to make out anything from Ari Aster's interviews.
It really there. I don't know. It was very,
The world in which the story takes place, especially during the first third of the movie, is a visual personification of Beau's anxiety and turmoil. Every scenario he goes through is an absurdly exaggerated version of what a regular person might face in their everyday life. If he were losing sleep because of some noisy neighbors, someone would blame him for causing that noise. If he were running late for a flight, his apartment keys would disappear. If he were out of cash in a store, the cashier would immediately threaten him with a police call. If he were to encounter a police officer, his life would be on the line. Every situation Beau faces morphs into one of his fears. We witness the first culprit of this constant fear and tension in the opening scene, which shows us Beau's birth from his perspective. The trigger here was not hearing Beau's cries right after the labor, which led to his mother's horrifying screams and accusations against the doctors. The hysteria and incrimination that we caught a snippet of here are the basis on which Beau's frail personality will be built. From this scene, we also realize that this hysteria is usually unwarranted, because within a few seconds, we do hear Beau's cries behind the movie's title card. We then transition to a psychiatry clinic where we see Beau in an advanced stage of his life, but observing his outward form and mannerisms alludes to his immaturity. He's only an adult physically, but mentally and socially, he seems to be stuck in a cocoon. Beau informs the psychiatrist of a visit he planned to make to his mother's house the next day for a rather peculiar reason: his father's death anniversary. The psychiatrist asks how he feels about this visit. His response comes in two forms: a resentment-filled gaze at his mother's persistent calls and messages during the session, and his description of a recurring dream he's been having. The psychiatrist cuts him short before he had the chance to tell what the dream was about, and summarizes the session with one word: guilty. On his way home, Beau passes by a mother scolding her son for leaving her sight. Simultaneously, he stops by a street vendor to buy a statuette of a mother figure holding her child. This is an allusion to the coexistence of love and resentment in unhealthy maternal relationships. On his apartment door, he sees a poster with a warning of a venomous spider lurking in the building. Unsurprisingly, the spider is in his apartment in particular. Beau grabs a frozen meal with a logo consisting of two letters MW forming a ligature, and the microwave he uses to cook that meal has a similar logo. Before heading to sleep, Beau greets a fuzzy portrait of his father that shows nothing but indistinguishable features. A news report Beau saw on TV about a homeless man running through the streets and randomly stabbing pedestrians, as well as noisy neighbors and notes slipped under his door accusing him of causing the noise, made for a difficult night for Beau, which eventually led to him oversleeping and running late for his flight to visit his mother. In an attempt to counterbalance his tardiness, Beau starts running off in all directions like a madman, and after he's all set and ready to leave, he remembers something. He goes to grab it, and as he comes back, his apartment keys and his luggage are gone. Amid his bewilderment, he turned to the first person he spotted, the maintenance man, who showed extreme courtesy.
You're fucked, pal.
The item that made Beau turn back and consequently lose his keys and his luggage is a dental floss, which previously appeared on a billboard carrying the same MW logo we saw earlier. Beau tries contacting the landlady but fails to reach her. So he decides to call his mother to explain the situation. Her instinctive response was to panic over him missing the flight, not losing his apartment keys, as though visiting her has priority over his home security. Her initial reaction, the awkward silence that follows, and Beau's desperate attempts at justifying his position all tell us that she is the type of mother who constantly judges and manipulates her child. To relieve some of the stress induced by that phone call and by some disturbing street noises, Beau decides to take zabnotecril, a medication prescribed by his psychiatrist. It's a fictional drug that the psychiatrist has specifically instructed him to take with water, which is the most mundane advice that pretty much applies to all oral medications. It is more necessary for some medications than others, but in any case, it shouldn't warrant a panic attack like the one that struck Beau when every single source of water around him has gone dry. Afterward, he starts googling the adverse effects of taking zabnotecril without water, and the very first search result is a memorial of someone who died because he didn't take the medication with water, which is hilarious. I really love the dark sense of humor in this movie. It's so effortless and it comes out of nowhere to turn a horrible situation into an absurdly comedic one. After reading that result, he had to get some water by any means necessary, even if it came to going to the store across the street. And we all know what's waiting in the street. Beau uses a book to prop open the apartment building door, makes a run for the store, and drinks the first bottle of water he can get his hands on. But in Beau's world, things can't just get resolved that easily. This is merely a trigger for a new disastrous chain reaction. Beau is delayed because his credit card got rejected and because he's out of cash. And this allows every homeless person within a 2-block radius to enter his apartment building. In those moments, two thoughts were agitating him. The first one is the apartment building door closing on him, and the second is for all of those people to enter his unsecured apartment. And naturally, both of these thoughts broke into his reality. After spending the whole night outside, Beau returns to his apartment, and things are not as bad as expected. They got the water running again, upgraded his monitor, made some nice artwork on the walls, and decorated the entrance with a dead body, just to make up for the lost keys. Beau uses his upgraded monitor to book another flight, and once again his credit card gets rejected. So he calls his mother to explain everything, but a stranger picks up the phone. And here, Ari Aster shows beyond doubt that he can return to the pure terror of his previous works whenever he wants. The way information is revealed made my skin crawl, and saying Joaquin Phoenix was great is kind of redundant at this point of his career. But I have to say that he is a big part of why this scene was so effective. What we learn here is that Mona Wasserman, Beau's mother, had died in a falling chandelier accident, and the UPS employee who picked up the phone had discovered her body in a headless state, because it's not an Ari Aster movie without an extreme head trauma. Beau experiences an emotional disorientation that petrifies him for an extended period of time before leading him like a sleepwalker into the bathtub. But the thing is, it's kind of difficult to relax in the tub when there is a man clinging to the ceiling above. The reason why the first third of the movie is my favorite is that the world in it functions the same way a nightmare does. Everything is a source of threat, most things are out of place, people behave oddly, and other people's reaction to these behaviors feed into the strangeness of it all. And the one in the center of the nightmare is just hobbling in his helplessness. Oh, and in case you didn't notice, the guy laughing here is Simon from Midsommar. The last time he commented on a suicidal jumper didn't go so well. The man clinging to the ceiling was able to hold on until our little fella gave him a face massage. His fall had Beau bolting naked into the street, and you know who else is naked in the street? The homeless stabbing man we saw earlier on the news. Beau seeks protection from a police officer, but the latter holds him at gunpoint and orders him to drop the weapon and freeze, even though Beau is neither armed nor moving. And upon realizing he is actually going to get shot, Beau sprints back towards the homeless man he just escaped, and the nightmare ends with him running into a moving car and losing his consciousness. Beau wakes in a Barbie movie set, and he's greeted by the couple Grace and Roger. Grace informs him that he was hit by her car, but that's not the only reason why he's bedridden. Beau was stabbed by the homeless man, but Roger is an experienced surgeon, and thus he was able to dress and treat his wounds. And to keep track of his condition, he strapped a little health monitor on his ankle. The three gather at the dining table, and we learn that Grace and Roger's son passed away in military service. We also learn that psychotropic drugs are casually consumed in this family, especially when talking about the younger daughter, Toni, who gobbles them like Cheetos cheese balls. Probably now more than ever, considering the current circumstances, as her room is occupied by Beau when her late brother's room is just down the hallway, and it's way more suitable and more empty. But if you want an illustration of that room's accessibility, Grace made a jigsaw puzzle out of her son's portrait, and apparently she does them on a daily basis. Beau isn't the only one adopted by Grace and Roger. There is also Jeeves, an unstable man who was in the same military unit as their son, and was by his side when he died. It is very apparent that his time in the service induced some deep mental problems, and just like the rest of the family, he has a serious drug dependence. As he jumps into the pool, he puts his hands in the air, seemingly protecting an imaginary rifle, as if his consciousness is still back on the battlefield. Which made me realize that he and Beau share a specific characteristic. Both of them suffer from deep psychological issues that made their development come to a halt. Because of these issues, Beau couldn't develop past his puberty, and Jeeves couldn't develop past his experience on the battlefield. While Jeeves is infiltrating enemy lines, Beau calls his mother's attorney, who kept guilt-shaming him for being late to the funeral, and declares that every minute more they wait for him will further humiliate his mother. This immediately drives Beau out of his chair to ask Roger to book him a flight. Roger strongly rejects this request because a flight may pose a serious risk for his condition, but he promises to drive him there the next morning. Before long, that promise faded when Dr. Roger got an emergency case, allegedly. Grace sent some peculiar looks towards Beau without Roger noticing. She tries to whisper something but back away when Roger approaches. So she conveys what she wanted to say, first by passing a note asking him to stop incriminating himself, and second by whispering in his ear, Channel 78. When he turns the TV on that channel, he sees himself through a surveillance camera, which means Grace was trying to clue him in on the fact that he's being monitored and to warn him against incriminating himself. But Grace isn't referring to literal crimes, and this isn't a real surveillance camera. In fact, the story here takes a hard turn into the surreal, because when Beau fast-forwards the footage, he sees events that he's yet to encounter. In other words, he actually fast-forwarded past the movie itself. This symbolizes Beau's lack of control over his life events. His weak, dependent personality, along with his constant fear, made him prone to exploitation and manipulation by those around him. Those who invade his home, those who blame him for disruptive circumstances, those who threaten him with false accusations, those who pretend to be his caretakers, and the one using maternal love and attention to observe and direct every step he takes, right up till the point where his future is already decided and recorded without his input. There's a second camera surveilling him, and its name is Jeeves. Both his new siblings seem unhappy about him settling in, and the movie uses them to emphasize the importance of parenting in shaping one's personality. Of course, in the most twisted way imaginable, because Ari Aster. Grace and Roger have grown obsessed with their son's image as a war martyr, and in their obsession, they forgot to provide their other child with the same amount of attention. Toni disappeared under her late brother's shadow. She constantly feels like she's being replaced, whether by her brother's memory, by his friend, or by Beau unfairly taking her space. And just like the latter, she is losing control over her life. But unlike Beau, Toni goes through extreme measures to retrieve some of that control, like taking drugs, manipulating others, and finally, attempting to replace her brother with two kinds of paint, pink and blue. She uses the pink to paint his walls to make them similar to hers, and uses the blue to figuratively turn into her brother. And what better way to achieve that than to guzzle the whole can? Now she's just like him, blue and dead. Grace has a nervous breakdown upon seeing the state of her daughter. And since Beau was the only other person there, she puts the blame on him. So she reaches for a freaking sword, which made Beau break through the glass door in a very funny way. Grace sets Jeeves after Beau, ordering him to rip him apart, and Jeeves is way too enthusiastic about it. While running through the woods, he encounters a pregnant lady, who was initially apprehensive, but soon after, she approaches and shows kindness towards him. And when one of his wounds starts bleeding, she tends to it, because she has past experience.
Trust me, my father bled to death.
She turns out to be a part of a traveling theater known as the Orphans of the Forest, And as the name implies, all members have lost their parents, either through death or abandonment. That being so, they were empathetic upon hearing about his mother's recent demise, and they welcomed him to join them for a play they were rehearsing. While he was escorted to the theater, Beau notices a man following him, and this isn't the first time he sees him. He was observing him from afar back at Grace and Roger's house. Beau sits among the crowd as the play starts, and the opening presents two tombstones with the engravings Mother and Father. Yeah, just rubbing salt into the wound. In the play, we see a man lamenting his parents' loss. He tries to move on, but the shackles of grief hold him. Beau connects with the character's misfortune and envisions himself in his stead as he breaks the chain. We are then presented with a fantasy story where Beau is the protagonist, a story that contradicts his reality. Here, he is portrayed as a strong man who has agency over his actions. He chooses a village to reside, he learns a craft to earn a living, he builds his own house, he chooses a partner who he loves, and he has sex with her, something he never experienced in his reality, and I'll get to the reason shortly. Visually, this segment is probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in a film. The incredible animation and art direction were achieved by Joaquin and Cristobal Leon. Aster spoke to them after he was blown away by their stop-motion animation The Wolf House. This segment represents Beau's perception of independence. It is the only part of the movie where he's not being controlled or manipulated by anyone, but in my opinion, it's dragged on and kind of killed the momentum of the movie. The first two segments, although they were around 90 minutes long, didn't feel like they were hindering the pace, and I can't think of any parts within these segments that needed trimming. The segment in the city was very entertaining and it did a great job visualizing Beau's fears. The segment at Grace and Roger's house had some memorable characters who enriched the themes, and it had a clear goal, which was getting to the funeral on time. This segment, despite how visually striking it is, made me feel like the movie just came to a halt. And the fantasy story delved into excessive details that I'm not even sure if I can convincingly analyze in this video. I mean, losing his house, losing his family, getting captured, and then reuniting with his family. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to get from all of this. Is the movie implying that Beau's fears were bleeding into his fantasy? Regardless, even if those details convey some profound messages, I think it would have been better if this segment was limited to the happy parts. Beau found a village, built a house, started a family, and lived happily ever after. I think that would have been sufficient. I don't think we needed to witness more suffering. The movie is 3 hours of suffering. This segment could have served as a breather for Beau and for us. When he snaps out of his fantasy, Beau sees that sitting behind him is the man who was following him earlier. The man approaches Beau and claims that he knows him as well as his father, because he used to work for his mother, and he also claims that his parents are in deep debt to her. When Beau takes a closer look, he asks the man if he is his father. If we go back to the portrait in his apartment, despite its fuzziness, we can spot a great resemblance between the man in the frame and this man who retreated hastily upon realizing that Beau recognized him, as if that wasn't supposed to happen. To explain the mystery surrounding Beau's father, we need to go back in time, back to Beau's childhood. When he was little, his mother told him a story, the story of his father's death. The latter suffered from heart murmur, and the first time he ever had sex led to his excruciating death. Of course, that sexual encounter was with her, and from it, Beau was conceived. His father's condition is genetic, and it also led to his grandfather's death and his great-grandfather before him. And naturally, it was passed down to him. Which is why, as I said earlier, middle-aged Beau never had a sexual experience with anyone before, because seeds of sexual fear were planted in his head from early on. Her emphasis on this story comes from a place of insecurity. She fabricated the whole thing for two reasons. The first is to separate Beau from his father. I think what happened is that she was having an affair with her worker, and when she got pregnant, she decided to push her lover away, using his parents' debt as a threat, which explains his sudden withdrawal earlier, probably because she didn't want to raise her son with a lower-class worker. The second reason is to negate any potential competition for Beau's love and affection, by having him reject the very concept of sexual intercourse. Out of nowhere, the theater turns into a battleground when Jeeves comes out guns blazing, murdering everyone in sight, starting with Beau's supposed father. If anyone's wondering how Jeeves found Beau's location, you remember the little health monitor on Beau's ankle? Well, it's actually a tracking device, which is now under Jeeves' thumb, who eventually utilizes it to incapacitate Beau and render him unconscious. After awakening, Beau walks up to the street and tries to hitchhike his way home. Surprisingly enough, a car conveniently pulls over as soon as he extends his arm. That MW logo on the GPS probably has something to do with it. Beau finally reaches his mother's house. In the front yard, we see a huge statue similar to the statuette he bought in the beginning. The state of this figure reflects Beau's feelings towards his mother throughout the story. At the outset, when he was planning to visit her and they were ostensibly on good terms, the figure was intact. When he heard about her death and his anxiety was closing in on him, the figure broke. When Grace showed him motherly tenderness, the figure was cracked but glued together. And when he started having some independent thoughts, he gave it away to the pregnant lady. As for this enormous version, it reflects his mother's feelings towards him, her possessive love towering over him, almost erasing his mere existence. Inside the house, we hear a recording of a eulogy and see the maintenance man from Beau's apartment building. At the site of the accident, there is a plaque embossed with the words, "Here fell the chandelier that took Mona Wasserman's life." Kinda redundant if you ask me, especially when the headless corpse is lying right there with an open casket and a very noticeable birthmark. While he was wandering in the house, he passed by a collection of ad posters. A surveillance camera ad, a shampoo ad, a medication ad. Some incorporate pictures from Beau's childhood, and all of them carry the MW logo, including one poster displaying his own apartment building. If it's not clear already, MW stands for Mona Wasserman, Beau's mother, a wealthy entrepreneur and owner of a colossal company that specializes in pretty much anything you can think of. Frozen meals, electronic devices, razors, news channels, and funniest of all, the movie itself is supposedly produced by her, since the MW logo appeared during the opening credits. The ubiquitous nature of this brand further emphasizes Mona's established dominance over Beau. Everything, whether it's his home, his transportation, his food, or even his dental floss, which notably was the reason for missing the flight, are all under her control. After passing by the ad posters exhibition, Beau reaches a collage portrait of Mona, assembled from tiny pictures of all her employees. Upon taking a closer look, he distinguishes some familiar faces. Among them are some of the homeless people in his neighborhood, the street vendor who sold him the statuette, and Dr. Roger. Now we can figure out why Grace was trying to warn Beau. She knew her husband was a part of an elaborate scheme. At night, someone else shows up late to the funeral. A feminine voice that allures Beau to the front door. Beau instantly recognizes her, Elaine. She was the only person, besides his mother, with whom he was able to form an emotional attachment. They met in their teenage years, and there was a clear contrast between them. She was outgoing, bold, and wild. She and Beau were like two opposite magnetic poles. Of course, Mona would have none of that, and she lost it one night when Elaine barged into their room telling Beau that they're taking her away, probably by Mona's influence. And to make Beau feel bad, the latter started yelling, "My heart, my heart." After all these years, Elaine's memory lingered. Her picture is still kept in his drawer, and reuniting with her was something out of a dream. Although he knew why she was there, he saw her picture within the collage. The only person he was able to connect with turned out to be just another pawn in Mona's empire. However, Elaine made a claim. She claimed that she stopped working with her 1 week ago. This could mean that she quit her job or was fired by Mona because her feelings towards Beau made her refuse to participate in Mona's scheme, which will be unraveled soon. The long years they spent apart didn't stop Elaine and Beau from reigniting their spark and heading straight to Mona's bedroom. They started having sex on Mariah Carey's tunes, and when they were about to finish, Beau panics as he remembers the genetic heart disease that killed his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather. To his surprise, he's still alive even after finishing. No chest pain, no arrhythmia, nothing, which exposes the falsity of Mona's story. But we are still inside a world governed by Beau's fears and anxieties, and in his subconscious, there is a link between sex and death. Since he's still alive, these repressed fears had to materialize in another form. Elaine instantly dies and stiffens on top of him. Beau flips out, jolts off the bed, and buries his face in his hands. When he tries speaking at her, he sees another woman at the door, Mona Wasserman. She faked her death by having the housekeeper stand under the chandelier, as a trade-off for supplying her family with a lifetime of wealth. Beau wasn't exactly surprised by this, because he recognized the housekeeper's birthmark on the dead body's hand. But he was bewildered by this whole scheme, which involved faking her death, recruiting dozens of people, and even infiltrating his sessions with the psychiatrist, who is revealed to be a complicit. All designed to paint Beau as an ungrateful, undutiful son, and finding him in this compromising position sealed the deal for her. The paradox of this test she puts him through lies in the fact that she deliberately impeded his journey on several occasions. She used the maintenance man to snatch his luggage and his keys. She used the homeless people to lock him out of his apartment. And she used Roger to further suspend him. She set him up for failure so she could scold him for it. Another paradox emerges when she blames him for his inability to take action and to stand up for himself. She tells him that his lack of agency doesn't make him innocent, failing to realize that her overbearingness and her judgmental nature are what stripped him of these traits to begin with. She then makes him feel indebted by mentioning her mother, who didn't show her any love, and blames her grandmother for it, which is a not so subtle way of saying bad parenting is inherited across generations. Mona's yearning for parental affection made her overcompensate by flooding her son with love to the point of suffocation. Beau dares to ask about his father, a taboo question he once asked as a child and got locked in the attic as punishment. This memory is presented in a unique way, where Beau is separated into two characters. Brave Beau, who challenges his mother and dared to ask unwanted questions, and Coward Beau, who was confined within the safe zone, which was the bathtub. More on that in a minute. And we see the whole thing through his perspective. This memory is the dream Beau tried to describe to the psychiatrist before he was cut short. When he asks about his father at the present time, he faces the same punishment as before, but this time through manipulation and convincing him that up in the attic he will find the truth about his father. When he climbs up, he finds two things through the darkness. The first one is another version of him wearing Brave Beau's clothes. His pitiful state denotes the long years he spent in there. And the second one is a monster designed in the shape of male external genitalia. And the few words uttered by this creature tell us that this is Beau's father. The attic represents Beau's repressed memories, memories that Mona tried to lock away. His father, whom he only perceived as a reproductive organ because he knew nothing else about him, and his brave side, who was completely beaten down by her. Out of nowhere, Jeeves reappears and starts shooting the creature kills him, and I have no idea what the hell this is supposed to mean. It's way too silly and it undermines the profound meaning of the previous imagery. After that, the door opens and Beau slides down the ladder in a state of shock. Mona shows great pity and concern for him, but as soon as he apologizes and begs, she flips a switch and starts shaming him, insulting him, and making him feel indebted. And she did that on several occasions. Whenever she wants something from him or feels she might lose him in any way, she puts on this concerned, caring persona. And when she knows she has him in her grip, she goes back to her bitter, spiteful, self-righteous behavior. It's like she developed some sort of mechanism for breaking him down. This time, he does break down, but not in the way she was anticipating. Before long, Beau snaps out of it and showers her with apologies. But do we really think Mona's gonna waste such an opportunity to do her thing? Beau leaves the house, takes a boat, and we get the feeling that he's finally free of her. Only, psychological problems can't be resolved that easily. Not for Beau at least. I don't believe Mona literally died in this scene. I believe her relationship with Beau has come to an end. But what lingered is the guilt he feels towards her. Hence, the next scene starts with Beau entering a dark cave leading to a hall surrounded by countless seats filled with spectators. Before them are Mona and her attorney who was on the phone earlier. The scene was presented as a trial held to reach a decision regarding the crimes committed by Beau, which included getting lost in a mall as a child and then intentionally hiding out of Mona's sight in fear of punishment, observing some boys he was acquainted with as they rifle through Mona's undergarments without preventing them, being late for her funeral, and other incidents that can either be explained away or are the outcomes of Beau's frailty, which, as we all know at this point, Mona is directly responsible for. There's another attorney defending Beau, but his statements are barely audible, just a faraway voice echoing in the distance, unlike Mona's attorney whose voice was clear and comprehensible. The implication here is that Beau's remorse has taken over his thoughts, while self-esteem and self-defense were unavailing. The court's final judgment found the defendant guilty, a verdict that was reached since the very beginning when it was recorded in the psychiatrist's notebook, and the sentence is death by drowning. Like many other events in the story, this scene is not to be taken literally. I don't think Beau actually died here, but rather this tragic finale symbolizes Beau drowning in his guilt. And this is not the only point in the movie where drowning was used as a metaphor for being restrained by guilt or fear. When Beau heard about his mother's death, water overflowing from the bathtub was rippling towards him. Shortly afterwards, the guy clinging to the ceiling almost drowned him. During the fantasy segment, a flood destroyed his house and separated him from his family. In this memory, coward Beau was in a bathtub, and Mona was trying to force brave Beau to get inside with him. Despite all of these negative experiences, Beau still couldn't survive away from water. He was conditioned to these shackles since childhood, to the point where briefly running out of water can send him into a panic attack. And when he attempted to break free, he became completely submerged in it. Beau is Afraid isn't as good as Ari Aster's previous works. The script could have been more focused and less repetitive, and the movie needed to spend a little more time in the editing room to judiciously decide what parts to keep and what parts to leave out. But the movie's cons do not outweigh Aster's unique vision, which fills every pixel in the frame and offers a sensory experience that can send us to the depths of the human psyche, which Aster has proved time and time again that he is more than capable of exploring. And I'm giving Beau is Afraid an 8 out of 10. What did you guys think of Beau is Afraid, and what did you think of this analysis? Did I forget something? Did I misinterpret some details? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and ring the bell, and I'll see you next time.